So who here has seen a Mission Impossible movie? Can I get a show of hands? Show of hands, okay. Tom Cruise, he is the only one able to accomplish this impossible mission. And the rest of us are wondering, how is this person, Tom Cruise, how is he able to accomplish this mission, which is evangelism, right? Somebody that's sharing the gospel, making disciples. And oftentimes, this is what many churches look like. They look like a steep cliff. That's not what it's about, right? But when it comes to different churches, sometimes there are some people that are really evangelistic, making a lot of disciples, and everybody else is like, how on earth did they get up there to the top of this cliff? If you guys can't see, feel free to move down this way. But the rest of us, so this person's able to do it, and then this person's doing it badly, okay? So this person's, someone's trying to do it, this one, but is doing it badly. This person's trying his best, can't quite figure out how to get up to the top of that cliff. This person's wondering, how on earth did he get up there? This person here is sleeping. These are the Z's. And you know what he's saying in his dreams? You know what he's saying? He's saying, that's not my gift, right? That person that's sharing the gospel. So he's asleep. This person is an armchair quarterback. Not only is an armchair quarterback, he has a firearm, and he's shooting at those who are doing it badly and criticizing and not doing anything himself. And then we have this ordinary believer over here who's running for his life saying, nope. All right, so that's what lots of churches can look like. That's what the evangelistic scene can look like, where we have these people that we view as, oh, this person is gifted and knows how to share the gospel, knows how to make disciples, but the rest of us, like, what on earth? How do we do this? Now, I want to suggest a different paradigm that's a healthier paradigm for making disciples. How can we make this mission impossible an accessible mission for everybody in the church? And instead of a cliff, I want you to think about a pyramid-type structure. Okay, so a scalable pyramid. Now, we do have people that are more advanced, and yet they're still trying to grow. And those that are more advanced are holding the ropes for everybody else trying to grow. So, no one has really achieved it. I'm still growing. You're still growing. If someone is here saying, I have evangelism all figured out, I don't want to hear about this, I just want to go out in the streets evangelize. Well, the truth is none of us actually have it all figured out. Isn't that right? We're all trying to grow until we die. No one has this totally figured out. And we struggle. This is a difficult task that we have. Who is sufficient for these things? But I want to suggest to you a scalable pyramid where whether you haven't shared the gospel with anybody in 10 years, or whether you're much more experienced and gifted and smooth than I am, well, you still can try to make it to the next step. If you're at an A, you can try to get to a B. If you're at, you know what I mean? If you're at a Y, you can try to get to a Z. So let's start with the very first step. Making the mission accessible. The very first step, the most important thing everybody needs to do, and something that anybody can do, even if you don't know how to share the gospel at all, the very first step is communion with God. So communion with God. Now, you may say, why does this have to do with evangelism? Well, I would say it has a lot to do with evangelism, because what does Jesus say in John 15? He says, I am the vine, or whoever abides in me and I in him, he it is who bears much fruit, for apart from me, you can do nothing, right? And that applies to evangelism and bearing evangelistic fruit. Well, apart from Jesus, we can't do this. We can't force people to become Christians. We can't manipulate people to become Christians. We can't bribe people to become Christians. We can't emotionally manipulate that, make people feel loved to such an extent that makes them a Christian. That's not how it works. The Holy Spirit makes someone a Christian. Now, okay, so Jude has an interesting sentence. The book of Jude, Jude says, keep yourselves in the love of God. Does that mean you can lose God's love? No, it's God's love, it's sort of like the sun. The sun's always there. The sun's always shining somewhere. But if you take your tomato plant that's in your backyard and you put it in your closet and you go on vacation, you come back and say, oh, my tomato plant is not going to look very good. We take it out of the closet. So we can take ourselves out of the sunlight of God's love in an experiential sense when we neglect devotion, when we stay up until 1 a.m. playing video games, when we hang out with the brosis floor until midnight and are chatting about all sorts of different things, or streaming Netflix shows, and we're waking up 10 minutes before class and then rushing across campus to get to class, and we've spent no time with the Lord. Again, do these things happen at Moody Bible Institute? They do, right? I went to Wheaton College. I'm guessing it's probably the same thing. And I can't say I was innocent of all that when I was at Wheaton. But really, devotional time is very important. Communing with God, abiding in Jesus. In John chapter 15, just lock yourself in a closet and just spend 10 years meditating on John chapter 15, 10 hours meditating John chapter 15. All the different times he says abide, right? Abide in me, I in you. If you abide in me and my word abides in you, ask whatever you wish and it'll be done for you. As the Father has loved me, so have I loved you. Abide in my love. It's like keeping yourself in the sunlight of God's love, and that's where power comes from. And when we commune with God, as we pray, we should pray for the salvation of lost souls and lost people every single day. That's not just a good idea. But I would argue that based on the Lord's Prayer, we can see that as a duty. Because we pray, thy kingdom come, the advance of the kingdom of Jesus Christ. Well, that should be prayed for every day, because he says pray for our daily bread. Right? That's a daily need. We should probably pray for that every day. Therefore, we should pray for lost souls to be saved every day. Even if the Lord's Prayer didn't exist, it still is arguable. You should pray for lost souls to be saved every single day. Think about the lost people that are already in your life, that God's placed in your life. Think about those you'll come in contact with just living in the heart of the third largest city in the United States. And you're in one of the most popular neighborhoods. It's expensive to live in this neighborhood. This is the most influential place in the Midwest. This is the economic and cultural hub of the entire Midwest. This is the LGBTQIA hub of the entire Midwest. You're in a very important place. God has placed you here, not by accident, but for a reason. And by the time you graduate, you will come across hundreds of unbelievers and people that work in places of influence, and God can use you to do a world of good by the time you graduate. And so be praying every single day. And if you're not praying for lost people to be saved on a day-to-day basis, don't be surprised when doors don't fly open in front of you, right? If you're not praying about this, don't wonder why doors aren't opening up for you to share the gospel with people around you. Now, the next step, you might say, okay, what does this have to do with sharing the gospel with unbelievers? I explained that. You're also going to say that about this one. Contact with unbelievers starts with a C, contact. So if anyone can't see it, communion with God, contact with unbelievers. I'm not talking about sharing the gospel. I'm talking about just being in proximity to unbelievers. Again, if you live in the middle of nowhere because you want to homestead off the grid and raise a bunch of cows, and no offense, gotta love cows. Like I love, I sympathize with that. In another life, if the Great Commission didn't exist, I'd love to homestead off the grid. But if you live completely off the grid, don't be surprised that you're not going to be sharing the gospel with many unbelievers and doors aren't miraculously opening up. If you confine yourself to the Moody bubble for 4 years and you're never around unbelievers and you only ever see Christians and you're scared to walk across, LaSalle Street, don't be surprised that doors aren't miraculously opening up. We want to put ourselves in strategic, conscientious contact with unbelievers. Why do I say conscientious? Well, there are verses that say bad company ruins good morals. There are verses that talk about a healthy separation from the world. Now, we can't leave the world. We're in the world, not of the world. And yet sin is contagious. Isaiah says, woe to me, for I am a man of unclean lips, and and I dwell in the midst of a people of unclean lips. He sees the holiness of God. He's convicted of this particular sin in regards to his mouth, his sinful speech, his sinful words. When he sees the holiness of God, something he may have not even noticed, a sin that was common in the culture around him, all of a sudden he's extremely convicted about it. And it's probably no coincidence that he is a man of unclean lips and lives in the midst of a people of unclean lips, because sin is contagious. If you're all stressed out and anxious going through the TSA baggage check line, getting into the airport, and well, you might be making someone else get stressed out, or their stress might be rubbing off on you, and the TSA worker's bad attitude will make your attitude worse, etc., etc. I'll just leave it at that. But you want strategic, conscientious contact with unbelievers. Can we be friends with unbelievers? The answer is yes, but I want to qualify it, right? We want to be friends with unbelievers with an evangelistic intent. Not that we're just using them to check a box or to get a number, but we do want to have their salvation in goal. Because if we truly love them, we'll care about their spiritual state. We'll care about them having true flourishing in their life spiritually and their eternal destiny. But again, what fellowship does a believer have with an unbeliever? We don't fellowship with them. We don't have true unity with them, but we do want to be friends with them. So how do you get in strategic contact with unbelievers, especially when you're at Moody Bible Institute, or after you leave here and you end up, who knows where everybody in this room is going to end up? Well, there's a number of difficulties and challenges. When you go to the gym, when you're at the airport, what's in everybody's ears? Yeah, AirPods and earbuds and headphones and all this stuff. Hard to talk to people, right? When you are sitting down next to somebody on a plane, even 10 years ago, it was easier to get into a conversation than it is now. When you were getting into an Uber 10 years ago, you didn't have a function where it's like, you check the box, I don't want the driver to talk to me. Right? You could just talk to the person. It didn't have all these barriers, but we're in more and more of a disconnected society. Now, contact with unbelievers. Let me give you a good example of putting yourself in the proximity of unbelievers. We held a big outreach at the Taste of Chicago. That was during the summer in August or September. And I had one guy that I invited these evangelists to come from around the country to help us share the gospel. One guy came from, I think, Dallas, Texas. He took the Amtrak. How long do you guys think? Who can guess? How long does it take to take an Amtrak from Dallas to Chicago? It took him over 30 hours. Why did he do that? Why on earth would somebody do that, right? Why not just take a plane for, 3 or 4 hours? Why would you take an Amtrak? Was he afraid of flying? No. What he said to me, I asked, why did you do that? He said, you wouldn't believe the conversations I can get into with unbelievers about the gospel on this train. And he was an older guy. But for me, I'm going to be honest, I would never inconvenience myself that much to put myself in proximity with unbelievers and get in these conversations. But I could certainly do it for 1 hour, right? If he's willing to spend 30 plus hours there and then 30 hours back just to get in the proximity of unbelievers, shouldn't we be willing to think about maybe there's an hour a week where instead of reading the Bible in my dorm room, I'm going to go read it at the public library. I'm going to go read it at this Panera Bread. Or I remember when I was in seminary, I got a Panera Bread subscription. It was like you paid $10 or whatever, and then when you cancel it, it says like, oh, please don't leave. We'll give you $3 a month, and I would do that. So I was on that Panera subscription for a long time. But if you show up to the same place week after week after week, you get to know the people that are in that place, that work out at that Planet Fitness, that play basketball in that league, that do rock climbing at that rock wall. Whatever your place of recreation or where your hobby is, and it's good to have, a hobby and have some way you can relate to unbelievers. You don't want to be totally irrelatable to people where you're just sort of like a Christianese enigma and they have, you know what I mean? It's good to have some ways you can relate to people. For me, it's working out, weightlifting, exercise, things like that. And the gym, a place of recreation, is a place where after you go month after month, you start to recognize the same people. You're not going to go join a gym and start sharing the gospel to everybody the first day. But over time, you recognize those people. And how do you share the gospel at a gym and cultivate friendships when everybody's walking around like this and they have earbuds in and they all have egos and no one's talking and they're all listening to music? Well, over time, you get to talk. So for instance, let's say I see somebody doing some exercise that I think is cool. So, how do you do that, man? Or what are your tips on how do I learn how to do a muscle up? Or how do I learn, and I'll ask somebody something. It's flattering to them. They'll share about it. And then at the end of that, I'll just say, what's your name, by the way? My name's Jeremy. It's nice to meet you. Have a great workout. But now I know their name for the next time. I write it down on my phone. If I learn someone's name, write it down on my phone so you don't forget the name. People love hearing their names. It's a sweet sound to them. And if you remember their name the next time, hey, Jim, how's it going? Then you may be able to start talking with them. And you greet each other every time. And then maybe in the locker room one day, you'll be able to have deeper conversation. What do you do for work, by the way? I do this. What do you do? Oh, I'm a pastor, or you know what I mean? Then you guys are all at Moody. That's an immediate lure into a spiritual conversation. Oh, why do you do that? Or what are you studying? Contact with unbelievers. When statistically speaking, is likely for the people here. When you have children, when you're at the playground, or when your wives are at the playground with the kids, people will automatically start conversations. Once you have kids, it's just it's so easy to get into conversations because people will just start talking with you about the kids. So you go to the same playground every week. You check out from the same Aldi lady every week. You go to the same coffee shop. Whatever. You get what I'm saying here, right? Strategic contact with unbelievers. It's good to have some fishing hole where you go. So turn to your neighbor. What is a strategic place that you could potentially use as your fishing hole, a place where you make yourself inconvenienced to have more proximity to unbelievers? Why don't you turn to your neighbor for 15 seconds and just share that? All right, so the next step also isn't about sharing the gospel, but it's something that will lead to more opportunities to share the gospel, just like it is communicating with those unbelievers. And I sort of got into that a little bit with the gym example. But when you walk by somebody at the gym, when you see somebody in your path, in a big city, it's hard. It's not like you're in the South or you're in a rural area or you're in, Cancun or something where it's like, hey, how's it going? But when you can greet somebody, try to greet them. When you can hold the door for somebody, try to hold the door for them. When you see a piece of garbage on the ground, try to pick it up. When you have a security guard, I remember for the schools that I've been in, my middle school, my high school, my college, my seminary didn't have a cafeteria, but do you know the names of the people that serve you food? That's an honest question, seriously. If I were to ask you guys, quiz you guys, what are the names of the people that serve you food? What's the name of the person that cleans your floor? You know what I mean? Some of you guys know, some of you probably don't know. Let's be honest. There are many people that are invisible to a lot of the world. The person that you might see at the store, well, try to learn people's names. Ask them how they're doing, right? And just getting these conversations going can lead to evangelistic opportunities. We also want to be a good witness and think about the way that we communicate and how that might harm or how that might help our witness. The idea that just making people feel loved will get them saved is a naive idea. The idea that I was sold in youth group, which is sort of like, once I stop drinking and stop smoking weed and stop hooking up and stop doing all these things, and I'm able to go to these parties and show how happy I am, then everybody will want what I have. That was the language that evangelism was presented to me in. And that was naive. Is once I stopped drinking and stopped smoking and said I was a Christian, I stopped getting invited to parties. I lost all my friends. I didn't, you know what I mean? All these drinking buddies, they didn't want to spend time with me anymore. I didn't get that response. Oh, everyone wants what I have because I'm walking around with a smiley face. Now, it did lead to many conversations, and I have seen some fruit from my high school days since then. But we shouldn't be naive in thinking that that it works this way. You walk around smiling, everybody will want what you have. However, how we carry ourselves, how we act, how we live, does adorn our testimony. So good works adorn our profession of faith. Does that make sense? They do adorn. They do commend our witness. It doesn't work as easily as some people would make you think. Yet it does help, and it also can hurt. So here's just one challenging example I received. There was one of my professors at Wheaton, Jerry Root, incredible professor. He taught the evangelism class, and he said that whenever he goes to a restroom, this is going to be a challenge. He tries to leave it in better shape than when he got there. Right? And I'm sure you've all been in some nasty bathrooms. That's a challenge for you guys. But the reason, his rationale is the person that comes in behind me, whether it's on an airplane, that could be the person sitting next to me. And who knows if you get blamed for whatever's there. And little things like that. And conversely, there was this Dunkin' Donuts that was a strategic fishing hole where I used to go to. I had Mondays off during seminary. I would just do my work at this Dunkin' Donuts, and all these Hindus, I would see them every single time. They got to know me. They knew what I wanted immediately when I got there. But that bathroom was always I don't think they ever cleaned that thing. But whenever I was there, I just cleaned it, People notice these things. Are you willing to be a servant? Are you willing to humble yourself and be the person that picks up trash? There's a pastor in Gary, Indiana, one of the roughest cities in the country. He has been picking up garbage on his street for 30 years around the church, and he's seen a real impact on that neighborhood. It's basically a trailer park, but he picks up garbage. He's had gang members fire bullets at his ministry and set his place on fire twice, and he's seen crazy things. Faithful presence, adorning his testimony. Everybody there knows him. Pretty much everyone there loves him because he's a servant. He commends his witness in that way. Now, there are other ways that we can hurt our witness. One of them is Christianese. Now, if you're at Wheaton or if you're at Moody, there's tons of Christianese. Let's face it. There are all sorts of things that you might say to one another on the brosis floor that if you just said it to a normal person out there on the street, they'd be like, what in the world are you talking about? So if you say, have a blessed day, bro, or something like that, it's people in the Black and Hispanic community that might resonate more, but lots of people on the street, they may think, what are you saying? So think about your language. Think about the Christianese. Don't say things in an unnecessarily cringy way. There are people in Christian communities that say all sorts of things in such a cringy way to unbelievers, but it's not how they talk. It doesn't sound. It's what's said in the bro floor is not the way normal unbelievers communicate. So think about that. I would also, if you're male, carry yourself in a masculine way. If you're female, carry yourself in a feminine way. This may sound controversial, but if you're a dude, don't paint your fingernails. Like, don't do stuff like that. It does not help our witness. It hurts our witness. This is something that for 2,000 years we didn't really have to think about. But anyways, how we carry ourselves can help or hurt our witness. Here's something else that's not going to offend anyone here, but in the older generation, this is something that might offend somebody, is for older men. They've come out and evangelized with me, but I'll see them do cringy things. We share the gospel with a woman around my age or younger, but the older guy will kind of brush the shoulder, and this is more common than you think. Where you older generations think, oh man, that was a good looking young woman we talked, but it's not flattering to the young generation today. It's creepy to the young generation. It may have been cool back then, I don't know why, but not anymore. It hurts our witness, and we're just tearing down what we're building up. I'm sure you can think you know what I'm talking about. People like that. You may not see it in evangelism. You might see it at your church, where you bring your female friends from your sister floor, and there's some old guys being creepy. And it's like, what the heck? I'm trying to invite this person to church, and now, anyways, what are some things that can help our witness, or what are some things that can hurt our witness? Any examples? You can raise your hand. Any pet peeves? Sure. So maybe not using Christianese, but also explaining things in a very clear way that's understandable to people. Now, one thing that can help us with that is using illustrations. Teaching using not long, drawn-out, 15-minute illustrations, but short word pictures. Think about how Spurgeon preached. Think about how some of the Puritans wrote. Think about a preacher that you like. A preacher that you like probably uses illustrations. And there is an Arabic proverb that the best speaker can turn the hearer's ear into an eye. Does that make sense? The best speaker can turn the hearer's ear into an eye. So vivid, clear communication. Using word pictures, using questions, using applications. These are the things that regain people's attention during sermons, right? The 14-year-old is thinking about her boyfriend. You want to interrupt her wandering thoughts and bring her back to the truth. The businessman is thinking about the meeting that he has the next day. You want to interrupt his wandering thoughts, bring him back to the truth. Preachers do that through illustrations, applications, questions. Please do not forget that. Illustrations, applications, questions. Do not be a boring speaker. Okay. Any other examples?
I think if you truly don't believe what you are preaching,
Nice.
it could drive somebody away. Or just
Well said. If you don't believe what you're saying, or if you're and you're a hypocrite, you're going to drive people away. Well said. I can't really add to that. Yeah.
People not knowing what they're talking about.
Okay, yeah, not knowing what you're talking about. If you don't know the answer to someone's question, don't just make up some nonsense. Just say, "Oh, I don't know. Can I look into that and get back to you? Can I give you my phone? Or can I get your phone number? Or can I?" And then maybe that can lead to a follow-up conversation. Great example. Let's move on for time's sake. The next one is going to be communicate the gospel. But I'm going to save that for our next message. This message right now is called The Method, How to Get in Conversations with Unbelievers. Next message is going to be on the message. So the method, then the message, and finally the messenger. They'll be shorter towards the end. This is the longest one. But we'll save that, communicating the gospel. We'll cover that next. And what's the actual message we should share once we get in that conversation with the unbeliever. One more thing about this, communicate with unbelievers. I'll add one more thing, is when you're in the serious, you're one step away from the spiritual. When you're in the serious, you're one step away from the spiritual. So maybe if you aim to share the gospel every single time, you can put an undue amount of pressure on yourself. Not everybody's like this, but in an evangelism team, maybe someone is like this, and I've had this feeling before where it's like, I can't even go anywhere in good conscience without trying to share the gospel with every single person. I can't go to Walmart, pick up something without feeling like I need to share with every single person. And you can be driven by sort of like a guilt, and almost the anxiety can mess up a conversation because you feel I have to get to the gospel every time. But if you just communicate with the unbeliever and focus on building a friendship and having a good conversation, let's say 30% of those lead towards the serious, and then half of those lead towards the spiritual, or 75% of those lead towards the spiritual. I count that as a success. Because if you're so intimidated by the pressure, I have to share the gospel every single time, you're just not going to do it as much, right? You're not going to do it as much because it's impossible to share the gospel with every single person God puts in your path. It's a huge amount of pressure if you always feel you have to share the gospel with every single person. But it's a actually socially acceptable goal to just try to strike up conversations whenever you can. I know one guy, he says he has a 3-foot rule. If someone's within 3 feet of me, I'm going to try to think of a way to try to get in a conversation with them. He said, "Oh, I like your shoes, man." It can be as simple as that. And then aim towards the serious. It can lead towards the spiritual. When my daughter was born, we were in the room where they kind of to prick the foot and do the hearing test, vision tests. So they're new, babies right here. And there was a nurse that was doing all the things. And we were there for about an hour. And I was like, how do I share the gospel here? Because I don't want to just share, hey, do you know what the gospel is? And then it just is awkward for the next hour. We're just standing here next to this baby and she doesn't want to talk to me. How do I share the gospel? Well, I was thinking about, I asked her this, do you guys see lots of, tragic things happen here? She said 20 years ago, I actually had the same OBGYN as you guys, and I was in the NICU for months and months and months, and my baby was just struggling, all these different things. Real burden to her. And she said, it just makes you wonder why. Well, that's a great open door right there. And I shared with her that, well, you know what? I've had lots of people that come and ask me questions. How could God allow this? How could God allow the Holocaust? How could God allow this particular suffering I've endured in my life? And I'm not going to pretend I know the answers to all those specifics because we don't know why. But what I do know is this, is what Spurgeon said is, when we can't trace his hand, we can trust his heart. Does that make sense? When you can't trace his hand, you can trust his heart. While I don't know the specific reasons behind particular instances of suffering, I do know that God loved me enough that he came into this world and was willing to become a human being and suffer and die on the cross and experience the most suffering possible to pay for my sins. That he didn't remain far off from this world, but he came into this world and was made vulnerable, was made killable, and suffered for us. And when I don't know why something's happening, I do know that, and that gives me comfort. And she really appreciated it. Sharing the gospel more aimed towards suffering than sin, yet still sharing the gospel, still mentioning sin, but it was the serious that led to the spiritual, and I think you'll find that to be true in your own experience. Communicating the gospel, we'll get to that in a second. We'll cover getting in conversations with complete strangers in like doxa contexts. But this is something I hope you can take with you, not just in doxa outreaches, but when you're settling in a house somewhere and you're having kids and you don't have a doxa team to go out with. How do I share the gospel in day-to-day life? I hope you'll do these things for the rest of your lives. Cultivate a culture of evangelism is the final thing. Has anyone here read an Ernest Hemingway book? Well, there's one book called The Old Man and the Sea. And there's an old man in a village in Mexico, and there's a boy that he's training and teaching him the skills of fishing. He's like a master fisherman, very poor. And then the boy wants to go out with him and say, no, go to school or whatever. And he goes out and he hooks a 1,500-pound marlin. These do exist. And that marlin pulls him out for about a day and a half. And he is fighting as hard as he can, and his hands are bleeding, his back is bleeding because he just says again and again, I wish I had the boy. I wish I had the boy, again and again and again. Evangelism is helpful when you have other people doing it. So it's easier to go out and share the gospel when you can bring somebody else along with you. One Christian leader named Harry Reeder said that everything you do by yourself as a leader is wasted. Not literally true. But when you're doing something by yourself, you're not training somebody else up. A good leader, whether a CEO or whether a pastor or whatever, reproduces himself at every layer of the organization. So taking people along with you and discipling them and teaching them what you know, bringing them along with you, or when you're with somebody else that's not as good at sharing the gospel as you, and you get to a really good conversation where a person seems very open, and it could be your turn to share the gospel, you let your friend share the gospel. My friend Jason here will share the good news with you. You let the person next to you share the gospel, even if they're not as good at you as doing it, and you give them that opportunity, they're strengthened. Even if you could have done a better job at that moment, right? What have you done there? You've trained somebody else up. You've given somebody that experience and encouragement. And now they can go and train others. So when bringing other people along with you, don't be a Lone Ranger, Tom Cruise sitting on the top of the cliff. Help other people along with you. There's one village that was documented to fish in this way where they bring out the whole town. And they have these things that look like woven shields. And they're in the beach area, in the water, in the waves. And they all narrow in together with these shields. And by the time they're all together, all the fish that were in that whole area are trapped right there, and they just scoop them out. But the whole village was working together and caught the fish. Now sometimes we're fishing just with a line by ourselves. But evangelism can be most effective when you have a church, has a culture of evangelism where everybody's trying to improve. Reading books on evangelism, watching videos on evangelism, learning about different worldviews, learning about apologetics, learning about different religions, learning how to talk to Muslims and Hindus and Buddhists and JWs and all these different groups. When you get that culture of evangelism, you can catch massive amounts of fish. That might look like somebody at the church that isn't going out on the streets, but she, has the gift of hospitality. And when you bring somebody into the church, she'll invite them over. Hey, you have anywhere to go after this? Can I host you for lunch? And she uses her gifts to welcome visitors into the church. Unbelievers, as Kevin DeYoung said, unbelievers aren't looking for a friendly church. They're looking for a church where people actually want to be their friends. So you want the whole community involved. Final step is continued growth. Continued growth. Well, enough said on that. We want to keep growing on and on and on. and getting better and better. Let me pass around donuts now. We'll take a break, and then we'll keep going in a second.